President Trump has made confronting China one of the centerpieces of his foreign policy. Why then is two staunch U.S. allies, Japan and South Korea, announcing economic cooperation and alliances with the People's Republic against the United States? Just what exactly has forced these two U.S. allies into the waiting arms of Xi Jinping? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about this and why all this might just have everything to do with Ukraine. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is a crazy story. Coming initially from Chinese state media, saying that China, Japan, and South Korea are going to be jointly coordinating their response to U.S. tariffs, right? This is, of course, according to a social media account affiliated with the Chinese state broadcaster CCTV. But here's the thing, Japan and South Korea have not denied this at all. And in fact, there was a report on Sunday that the country's trade ministers held a meeting to, quote, closely cooperate for comprehensive and high-level talks at this joint and to try to reach a joint free trade agreement to promote regional and global trade. This is a huge deal. Why? Because, well, first off, Japan and South Korea represent some of the largest economies in the world, right? So let's see if we can find the old list here. As you can see, the 10 largest economies in the world are, let's see, of course, the U.S. and China, then Germany, and then number 4, Japan, and of course, let's see, South Korea, not on here. I think it's actually like 12 or 14. Here we go. We'll find it on old Wikipedia. Right? South Korea coming in at 12. So as you can see, it represents collectively a huge portion of the world's GDP. And why then, though, would China and Japan say, listen, the U.S., you're threatening to tariff us, you're threatening, and so we need a place to sell our goods. And China has said, you are welcome to sell your goods here in a free trade zone. But this is a potential disaster for the United States, not just because we are going to actually lose access to potentially 3 of the largest 15 economies in the world, but more importantly, when China, Japan, and South Korea do business with each other, you know what they're not going to need? U.S. dollars. One of the reasons the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency. It's the reason why the U.S. can take out a massive amount of debt to fuel its budget. The reason all that can happen is because everyone wants dollars, because everyone trades in dollars. And just like any other shop in the world, right? Just look at, for example, cryptocurrencies. If you wanted to buy something with a cryptocurrency, there's tens of thousands of different cryptocurrencies. But if you wanted to make a purchase online, basically you can only do it in one of really 2 cryptos. And the reason is because of what's called the network effect. And this means that when everyone is transacting in the same currency, other people simply join in just because it's easier. So even if countries, this is one of the reasons that you see countries, for example, let's say India and Saudi Arabia, when they want to sign an oil deal, they'll often denominate it and require payment in US dollars, because this prevents the other smaller countries' currencies from having huge fluctuations. And when you start to see, though, large economic blocks switch to other currencies, it is a red alert for your own for a global reserve currency. When you combine this with the fact that Russia and China have also in order to circumvent sanctions from the Ukraine conflict, have also been engaging in a large amount of trade without denominating it in US dollars, you realize that the problems associated with this could become much more severe. But there is actually more to this story, right? Now, first, I want to point out that the president, you may be thinking, Paul, what are you talking about? The president tariffing South Korea and Japan? Yes, Trump has announced his tariffs are going to actually cover all countries. This is a problem because when you tariff your enemies the exact same way you tariff your allies, it says that you don't actually have any allies at all. People ask, what is the point of being America's ally if we cannot do economic business with them in a free trade kind of way, right? It's sort of like saying, again, imagine if you have two neighbors, one that you hate with a passion and the other that you consider a good, trustworthy friend, and you literally treat them both equally. At some point, your neighbor who thinks he's your friend is going to go, I'm not his friend. I think he's just an enemy too. That's what these guys are doing. But there's more to the story, and that has to do with Ukraine. Let me explain. China is obviously a U.S. adversary. The U.S. military, right, has worked tirelessly to counterbalance China in the Pacific, right? Because Japan, whose military is prohibited from conducting any operations outside of Japanese sovereign territory, and South Korea, whose military is focused 110% on countering the North Korean threat, both are contributors, fairly heavy contributors, to the sort of Pacific security, the deterrence of China in the Pacific. But the scales are not evenly balanced. China is one of the largest economies in the world with the most number of people and one of the largest militaries. So the U.S., of course, uses its carriers, its Marines, its fleet to keep the scales tipped against China and to stop China from engaging in any kind of aggressive actions. To that effect, in Japan, there are approximately 55,000 U.S. military active duty people in Japan. For context, guys, that's approximately the size of the entire French military, the entire German military. This is a huge force. This is essentially a second army, a second Japanese armed forces in Japan, right? In fact, let's see if we can size the Japanese SDF. In fact, it's approximately 1/5 of the entire SDF, and basically basically equivalent to an entire additional Japanese Navy, okay, or an entire additional Japanese Air Force. That's how large that contingent is. And of course, South Korea has a comparably large number. Now, South Korea's military, of course, has a mandatory conscription, but it has 28,000 U.S. military personnel on the Korean Peninsula. And there are a lot of rumors that this also includes the U.S. nuclear arsenal deterring South Korea on the peninsula, right? That's something that President Trump accidentally leaked. But what's more, I think he leaked it some like last year or maybe in his first administration. However, right? The size of the Korean army, right? Now, obviously, the Republic of Korea has about 600,000 personnel. So again, you're looking at around a 5 to 10%, increase in the total amount. But remember, this is the U.S. military we're talking about. Each one of those troops represent some really important, unique capacities. Again, especially if they're guarding or operating high-tech systems like nuclear weapons. So, what do those countries have in common? Well, in fact, they're two of the countries with the largest and longest-standing U.S. military garrisons providing assistance. And you might ask yourself, well, why is it such a problem for them? Why are they suddenly worried about having all this U.S. military assistance? Well, the answer is that this current administration has adopted a policy starting in Ukraine, but going to continue elsewhere, of sending people bills for services they never asked for, right? What the U.S. military told Ukraine for the last 3 years was aid, was military assistance, right? Was a helping hand from an interested neighbor, someone who didn't really care for Russia. They've turned around and said, actually, surprise, that aid, that food you were getting from a food bank, here's a bill for it to the tune of $500 billion. Remember, we've provided about $60 billion of aid up until this point, and the Trump administration, it continues to re-engage on the minerals deal, right? The minerals deal now, rumor has it, it actually demands a payment in full of all aid provided to the Ukrainian military in their fight against Russia. And once you do that, right, imagine if you had a store near your house, right? Again, a food bank, for example, that started to charge one of its recipients for food. once the word gets out that that food bank actually bills you for food, that it's not real a real food bank, it's not a real assistance, what are people going to do? They're going to avoid that food bank, because why would you go there when you could go to a grocery store where the prices are listed up front? If all it is a scam grocery store, no one's going to go there except for the naive, the stupid, and the utterly desperate. And so these countries all look around and say, listen, right now, the US military protects us from China's coercion and influence. But the US military, if they were willing to demand payment in full plus additional billions of dollars for 3 years of assistance, what's going to happen if you're South Korea and you have had military assistance from the United States since 1950? Right? What's going to happen if you're Japan and you have had a continuous US military presence on your island nation since the 1940s? The administration, and remember the leaked text messages and Signal, remember those? You notice that Stephen Miller particularly, but JD Vance too, explicitly said, we are going to provide this military action, but we expect remuneration, payment from the Europeans. This is a massive issue because now it is confirmed. It is revealed to everyone explicitly. Every other country has said the bill is coming, right? Those text messages said the food bank is planning on billing everyone. And now all of those countries, they are going to go and they're going to say, how do we protect ourselves in a world where we could get billed at any time? And the answer for Japan and South Korea is to say, we need to make nice with China. We need to get a good deal now, because if we wait until the US forces our hand with some crazy bill, China's going to extract more concessions. So instead, we are going to do a partnership with China. We're going to get in while the getting's good. And we are going to allow China to sell its cheap goods in our country, which is going to lower the cost of living, of course, for the average Japanese or South Korean. And we are going to let China access some of our high technology systems. This is a win-win for both parties. The only person who's not going to win is, of course, the United States, who is going to not have access to trade with three of the most robust and strongest economies on the globe, and is going to lose two of its most valuable security partners in the Pacific. So again, tough on China is starting to look more like great for the communists. Now, before we talk again a little bit more about the administration's absolutely bumbling, comical inability to negotiate in the Black Sea deal, I want to mention two things. The first, let's see if we can find it here, is our friends at UAO. You guys know that one of my core beliefs is that America isn't actually the White House. It's not the flags. It's not even the F-35s that fly overhead. It's Americans, right? And Americans still stand with Ukraine. That's why UAO and us here at Combat Vet Reacts, we are doing the Double Down fundraiser, which literally an anonymous Dutch donor has actually come out and said, I will match up to $250,000 of funds raised by the U.S. donors. And so we are trying to do it. Our goal is to put up $250K of US dollars. Europeans can donate too. You guys can contribute, right? But to me, I look at this as a challenge to Americans. And he'll match $250K himself. Actually, I'm using he. I don't know. It could be a woman. It could even be an organization. Tough to say. But if you're interested, of course, you can get some absolutely sick patches from one of the many, many units we're going to be supporting, like the GUR, including, you can see here, they've got this is their version of the CIA, by the way. So if you want an absolutely incredibly, insanely rare patch, this is their version of the CIA Special Activities Division, you want to do this donation. And remember, it's tax deductible. So, do it. Check the link in the description. Plus, of course, pick up your Strike Gum, 90 milligrams caffeine. It's an energy drink in every piece. If you're consuming energy drinks anyway, if you're like me, right, I'm a dad, I'm a business owner, I'm a content creator 7 days a week, and I still am an active triathlete. So I need all the energy I can get. And so this goes where I go. Without the sugar rush, no sugar crash, just good, clean energy. There's a reason that 50% of people who chew a single piece of Strike Gum order it again and again. The link to that also in the description. Okay, let's talk about the Trump administration, obviously burning a ton of bridges, just burning bridges right and left. And is he able to for all these sacrifices, what is he achieving? Well, the answer, it's not clear, right? Remember, no one really knows, in fact, if even the energy infrastructure ceasefire is happening, because Ukraine's Ministry of Energy is reporting that the United States and Russia are still trying to agree on a list of energy infrastructure targets. Now, you may point out that Russia should already know where energy infrastructure is in Ukraine. And this is obviously true, right? The Russians are pretending, they're doing a stalling game, right? They are trying to stall, they're pretending to not know, they're pretending to need all these things. And one of the reasons that they can get away with this is because the Trump administration has put in some of the least experienced negotiators that have really ever been at this level of government. Steve Witkoff, for example, has served exactly as of today, I think, about 100 days in any government role, right? For context, a typical senior diplomat will have spent 20 to 25 years in the foreign service of the United States. And if you believe that diplomacy is at least as hard as basketball, this is putting Steve Witkoff in charge of this is the equivalent of putting an in-shape recreational hockey player in charge of representing the U.S. in Olympic basketball. Putin is running them around. They don't even understand that simply saying don't target energy facilities should be sufficient. Or remember, don't target energy infrastructure. So the fact that Russia is continuing to make believe like they're not even sure if this ceasefire is in agreement, worth noting is, of course, the Ukrainians have pointed out that the Russians targeted a military hospital in Kharkiv, which is fine. That's a valid target, but it's technically a war crime, right, to target wounded soldiers who are off the battlefield. That's kind of sort of a legitimate military target. But then targeting many of the homes and civilian infrastructure around it is probably a violation of this. Again, and then there's, of course, a Black Sea deal that the administration swears is going to get done, but they just can't do it. And watching the administration just get turned around, played by Russia. Literally, all they're trying to do is re-implement an existing deal, something Russia already agreed to. But classic Russia, of course, why would they ever? Vladimir Putin is a great negotiator. He's never going to give you something when he can extract something in return. So even though he may want to re-implement the Black Sea deal, which allowed transit of grain through the Black Sea, why would he just give that up without getting something in return? For example, again, the U.S. The U.S., for example, did the exact opposite by excluding Ukraine from possible NATO membership, and in exchange, Russia provided nothing. So maybe the Americans could learn from Vladimir Putin how to actually negotiate and actually extract concessions from your naive and more or less childish partner. Again, childish as a reflection of the level of experience the average Trump administration negotiator seems to have. Now, before we get out of here, I want to point out one interesting story. It appears that a mysterious school bus crash has critically injured one of the only, in fact, woman who has spoken out publicly against being trafficked by some guy that YouTube's algorithm may not want me to say his name, but don't worry, guys. Those files are definitely going to be released, and those national security redactions, I'm sure there's nothing in there that's damaging to the president and other people in power. No way. And just a tragic accident. Anyway, thanks, guys. Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, Gars, Marnie, and Gina Questa, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karius, L90, Petratoro, and Jalen Gao. Thanks to all our lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. You are the people that support me and enable me to do this. Obviously, sponsors not clamoring to partner with someone like me, but you guys are, and that's all I need. See ya. Cheers.